Learn podcast, hosted by Yulia and Ina, friends, colleagues, passionate teachers and learners. In this series of cozy talks with a cup of tea or coffee, we talk about how we live and learn, move countries, adapt to change and mentalities, encourage and teach. While polishing our own understanding of learnability, we find support in the 4 pillars of Live and Learn philosophy, which include growth mindset, expat life, language acquisition, and skills development. Join us, enjoy, live and learn.
Da-da-da-da! Guess who is with us today? We are super happy and amazed to have Marina Yalanska is a person who we work together for so many years. Welcome, Marina.
Oh, happy to be here with you. I have been listening to your podcast for quite a long time, actually since the first episode. So it's kind of great and positive thing to have a chance to hear myself in it and to communicate together to discuss something.
Yeah, so we often talk about motivating each other, having this professional tribe, network, and so on. You're really one of the people who supported us not only in our professional careers as language teachers, but also since we started recording and airing our podcast. You've been among those few passionate supporters, and we're really grateful for you to be here with us.
Yeah, well, I believe that podcasts like this are going to be very useful for people of different kinds, not only in studying languages, but in general to understand how other people think, how other people feel, what kind of values they share in different countries and so on. Because now, although we have a lot of different kinds of communication, different channels of communication, people unfortunately communicate less, and knowing more about different people from different countries, different experiences is very precious, and podcasts are a good way to do it.
Fantastic. Do you listen a lot to podcasts? What's your favorite way to do it, time to do it? How can you describe yourself as a listener?
Well, I would say that I'm not a passionate listener because I'm a passionate reader and I am a visual. For me, podcast is not the best channel to absorb different information. So I listen to podcasts that are interesting for me because of their topics, like on marketing or design or something like that. And some podcasts that are interesting for me because of people who are there. My first podcast was years ago when I was teaching, and I tried to find something really useful for my students and at the same time for me myself to improve my listening. And it was a podcast it was English as a Second Language podcast by Jeff McQuillan from California. And that was the podcast that gave me the idea about that culture. Before that, I couldn't understand what it is. But his podcasts are not like yours, because yours are more about improvisation, about talking about different things, and his are like lessons. They are concentrated on improving vocabulary, on teaching. And that's maybe all to tell about podcasts, because if I have free time, I prefer reading. And that's why I cannot say that I am a fan of podcasts and listen to them all the time.
Yeah, but you're a true fan of reading, and you, I don't know, I think you're the person who I know reads the most out of anybody else. And it's been like this since we met, well, back in 2007.
Oh,
Can
yeah.
you imagine? I can even tell you the date when we met. It was
Oh.
the 17th of March.
Oh.
The 17th of March, just the day after St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited to see our department, and this is the day when we met
because I came to your department when it was not my department at that moment,
sure.
to have a kind of warm-up meeting, to get together to understand what kind of work can be done from me to the departments.
That's beautiful. And ever since I know that you're a keen reader, that you hold your reading challenges, you are a fantastic writer, and you are a member of the Ukrainian Association of Poets, if I'm right?
Well, writers, yeah, it was some time ago, but now I'm not, because, well, I'm not writing regularly in Ukrainian, and I'm not publishing a lot in Ukrainian. So at the moment, I'm not communicating with that association because I'm more focused on writing in English, and that's all.
Okay. But still, for me, that's true. Yeah, something that amazes me so much about the way you feel the words, about the way you put the words together, and about the way you communicate the beauty and the wisdom. Because I don't know, that's the way I perceive your influence on me.
Yeah, to which I could add our favorite question. So, Marina, how do you live and learn and perceive the world and acquire knowledge?
I think I live and learn, well, every day for me is a kind of lesson. So I never go to sleep without thinking what good I did for people this day and what useful I got from this day for myself. So that is the routine now. It's not a kind of philosophy or something I got from others. It was my way of living for all my life. So I think it's quite natural. And as I started reading at quite an early age, I was 4, and I think I could read better than I understood what I was reading about. That has always been for me the most effective way to communicate with the world: words, letters, languages, and so on. Now I could say that this is a kind of another air for me. Every day I read something, and this way I learn. But I don't believe that people can learn only from books, only from reading. They have to communicate with living creatures. They have to communicate with live, real people, and then combine that all with the experience they read about. In this way, this learning works. But if you try to separate those realities, it may be quite dangerous, because you will not have that experience of understanding it as a system. And when it is not a system, it doesn't work effectively, as for me. So this is how I do it. I love people in different manifestations. Their manifestation as kids is my favorite. This is what I love most of all, to get some energy, because to get some energy and to share some energy, because you don't need anything special. You just have to be interesting for them, and you have to be really interested in what they want to share with you. And I love people who are studying something. I love people who are teaching something, who are sharing something, creating, and so on. And this love of people makes life fun for me. And on the one hand, it is fun, and on the other hand, it is work, because you analyze it to become a better person tomorrow for all those people you love around. And although I know that not all the people are really kind and positive, and some of them are aggressive and so on, but I still believe that there are more kind and positive people. And I try to communicate with them, and I try to communicate with children from this position. And this makes them kinder and better and more positive. I think this is the way how we share the energy with each other, and this is the way of living and learning together.
That to me sounds like an exchange of positive energy mostly. Yeah. Could you say that you just avoid communicating with people who you feel are not kind enough, or what do you do when you come across someone who does not give a chance to exchange positive energy?
The question is quite interesting. If we are talking about my personal life, yes, I avoid communicating with people who are not positive. I can choose, and I do it. There is no any limit in my mind that I cannot, for example, stop talking to a classmate or someone who or relative just because they are my classmates or relatives. But if they are not positive, aggressive, or we just do not share the same ideas, I don't see why I should spend time on that. And I never try to get them to my point of view. No, I don't think it's needed because there are many people who I want to spend time with and to share, to exchange this energy. But if we are talking about work, and my work is closely connected to communication, I try to find the way to communicate in a positive way with any person I have to. Sometimes it's quite hard, but it is work. And when it is work, all kinds of work, all jobs have their hard things. And when communication is your work, you have to just to learn people more deeper, to understand how their brain works, how their methods of perceiving the world work. And in this way, you will understand better how to communicate with them without feeling offended or without thinking maybe they are not negative, maybe they just think differently. And if you communicate from this position, it means that you can communicate even when other people can't. I believe in that. So when we are talking about work, I will try to understand why the person has this way of communication, why the person has this kind of opinion, why they are not positive about some things we are discussing, and we'll try to somehow solve the problem if it exists, or try to find a way of communication which is convenient for them. But sometimes it's not possible, sure, because some people don't come to communicate with you, they just want to express themselves. And in this case, at some point, ignoring them is the best choice, the best way not to waste your time, something like that. But usually it works this way. I believe that the more you study how people work as creatures, as biological creatures, as social creatures, the better you understand why they behave this way. And it is possible to communicate with students, with colleagues, with clients from this position. The more you know about how people work as systems, as machines, the more you know about their biology, about their ways of thinking, the better you will communicate with them, just because you understand them.
Actually, you mentioned biology, and I know that you're a keen fan of neuroscience and how this part of brain reactions and stimulus affects our decisions, our behaviors, our patterns of behavior. It always amazes how much we're still having to learn about ourselves. Do you perceive yourself and the other people as the mystery to solve, the mystery to learn about from this perspective?
Well, no, I would say no. I have never tried to look at neurolinguistics or any kind of neuroscience as a way to solve the mystery. You know, when I was a child, in my childhood, I was the only child who didn't want to know how the trick is done. Usually, most children want to know how that was done, and I was the only one who didn't, because I want that magic. I want that just to be a kind of magic. And talking about neuroscience, I want to know it because it helps me to be a better communicator, and communication is the basis of my work, and not only work but also personal life. I love to know why people behave in that way because I can be helpful to them. Or sometimes there is no good communication between people just because they don't know the differences of each other, or they don't know how different factors can influence that communication, and how different words can be offensive or not, supportive or not, and so on. And that is the reason why I like this science, because it helps me to understand people better, and I love people. I feel like it is my mission to be useful, and you cannot be useful to someone you don't know how to deal with. So that is the reason, I suppose. Everything that helps me to understand people better works this way.
You have such a elegant vision, have such a ingrained wisdom of seeing things, seeing the world, seeing the beauty of it, seeing the value of it, and bringing love and communication to that. So I always admire you about
Well,
this.
it doesn't mean that I am a person who cannot see dark spots or something. It's just because I want to focus on light spots, not dark spots. It doesn't mean that they do not exist, but or I don't see them, like like a crazy optimist that doesn't see any kind of bad ideas or something. No, but yes, I suppose that when you are concentrated on beauty and positive thinking and constructive thinking, not just not only emotional but also constructive, which is systematic or something, this can be helpful to, in general, to be more positive, more peaceful, more confident, and so on.
Less stressed, less constrained, less aggressive, less. So this is something that helps the balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, this helps not to have creative blocks, because it helps not to burn out, because you can see different things from other sides and you understand why it's valuable, why it's important. Another point to study neuroscience, you understand what is procrastination, why it's important to have some breaks, why it's important sometimes to just do some stupid things, and that's all tells you not only more about other people but also about yourself. So that helps to avoid all kind of creative blocks and burning out at work.
Yeah, sure. Marina, how does that align, if in any way does, with your preferences as a reader? Do you prefer books with a happy ending? Do you prefer to concentrate on positive or light spots?
That's the good question. My favorite kind of books, if we are talking about books for just not for work, not for, I don't know, professional development, but just for pleasure, is detective stories. And stories that are filled with a lot of characters, like Maeve Binch's ones. She's an Irish writer who is, for me, one of the best examples of a person who writes very well about a lot of people at one place, showing their wide palette of characters, But it is not a kind of detective stories. These are just stories about life. You just open the book and get into the place where you have never been, and in the end of the book, all those people, all those families, the histories of their places, and so on. As for happy ending, for me it's much more important that the book is natural. I don't know how to say, but sometimes you read the book and you understand that these characters cannot behave or exist in this way. It is not natural. Or this story cannot end with happy ending. It's not possible. And when everything is absolutely dark, but then there is, I don't know, the Cinderella's wedding, For me, it is a kind of unnatural, and this is what I don't like in books. But as for happy ending, sure, I don't wait for it in every book I read, but I always hope that it is going to happen, and somehow some people are going to be happy in the end. Well, on the other hand, I could also say that I don't like books that where positive characters are exaggeratively positive and negative are absolutely negative. I don't believe that it can happen in real life. All people are both bad and good, are both dark and light. And when they try to show only one side, it looks one-sided and it's not full. That's why I don't believe that happy ending is possible in all the books, because not all the people see the happy endings in the same way. I mean that, for example, what I could believe is the happy ending for this family or this character or something can be absolutely not happy for them. So
yeah, that's interesting. That's the way to project this extraordinarily positivism to reality, right? To be natural, as you said, in the almost biological way of things going, right? Because what is a happy ending is just a point of time where the narrative stopped. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't go further, and the next day or the next year or the next meeting is there. So do you agree that that would be the difference between the story and the life, because life goes on?
Well, yes.
There is life after Cinderella's wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would not imagine that. I would not want to imagine that, because it's hard for me to imagine that they will live happily ever after when they saw each other only once. Although there are a lot of stories, and they are popular, about people from different social layers, from different cultures, getting together and becoming, great families and so on. Yet in the life, I believe that it is a sort of exception more than everyday situation. Imagining that they have absolutely different education background and so on, it would be a hard work to get together as one family. I would like to imagine that they have done all that work and lived happily ever after. That would be a very positive way of thinking, but who knows?
That would be another story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I believe we've seen several stories in both personal experience and having some examples of other people from different cultures. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sticking together and working on their relationship, or else working on coming together somewhere and having this path together, taking into consideration different cultural backgrounds, which also is true about communication within one culture. Even worse, in my opinion, because somehow we expect to, because we belong to the same culture, to have fewer differences. And still it doesn't work like that. That's why your curiosity and love for people, the desire to see what kind of people they are, why they react that way, or why they are these kinds of people or whatsoever, is really wonderful, amazing from the point of view of appreciating and valuing the differences, whether they are within one culture or belonging to different cultures.
Yeah, and I believe that all people can understand each other if both sides want to do it. It's just about working on ourselves and on communication with other people. It's not about differences in culture, in age, and something like that. It's just about if people want to understand each other or not. No other things work. And in this case, yes, I believe that anything can happen. People from different cultures can understand each other, can build happy families and so on. But it will mean that they have work on it. they have to work on understanding each other better and so on. But on the other hand, yes, it sounds interesting that when you do not belong to the other culture, you don't expect other people to be like you. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and this is the expectation management in the end. So depending how much do we expect, how difficult it's going to be, or how demanding something is going to be. So when we come to another country, or we have, I don't know, a partner from another country, we already know. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean, as Ina mentioned already, that these expectations should be lowered when you have a relationship or a working relationship within the same country, place, city, and so on. There still should be this expectation that more work, more effort, more time, more building relationship is necessary. So it's not going to happen just because they are local. So it will be easier. So I think that that's just might be insufficient risk management.
Yeah, I now just thought that on the other hand, communicating with other cultures seems more like other cultures or people from other social layers seems to be more interesting and exciting just because you don't know much. It can add to a sort of romance you have at some stages of communication. It makes communication more romantic just because you don't know what to expect. But in the long term, it may both be the reason for happy ending or unhappy. That sounds fun. That's what you are talking about when you say that your podcast can bring you to any topic in the process.
That's true.
Yeah, and also taking into account who we welcome as a guest. Now, what comes to my mind is my experience as an interpreter when in one of the events, a person wanted to recite his poem in his language and asked me not to translate until another person said what they felt about it. And so there was this moment, like a person was reciting the poem and then asked what the listeners could feel. After that feedback, they asked me if that aligned to me to the meaning of the poem being recited. What I could feel was that really, yeah, it did come very close, like the emotions and the ideas that came in the feedback were very close to the meaning of words, but that wouldn't mean so much because the sound, the rhymes, the melody, the tension that there was in the poem meant so much more than the meaning of the words, to which I would ask you, Marina, to add what you feel and think about poetry and the importance of content and form, shape, yeah, in poetry.
What you have just told about reminds me the story when I was younger, I communicated a lot. I took part in a traditional Ukrainian choir that was going to different countries and presented songs in quite a traditional Ukrainian manner. There was no a country where people couldn't feel that content that was presented by these songs, although they didn't know the language. And that's the interesting phenomenon. I have never thought about poetry from this position, but I think that yes, poetry is a very special kind of literature that cannot be compared to anything else. What makes it special is when a poet thinks together about the balance of form and the content, as well as in songs. In songs, perhaps it's even more important because they have to work with music that has its own energy. But in poetry, you become a musician. You are not only the person who uses the words to transfer the meaning, but you also become a musician that has to find that melody that will share the mood, the emotion, the idea, the feelings, the atmosphere, and so on. I totally agree that form is very important to share that feelings, that atmosphere. But on the other hand, there are a lot of poems. There were even stages in the literature process when poets were more concentrated on form than on what they are saying. And that, as for me, as a reader, as a keen reader of poetry, I adore poetry of different times. I believe that it doesn't work, because poetry is the art of word, not only transferring the meaning, but also transferring the feeling in combination.
Yeah, which is why, would you agree that poetry is untranslatable?
No, I wouldn't, but it cannot be translated at 100%. It is a sort of, I had the experience of translating the poetry. And for me, the hardest way was translating the children's poetry, because you have to make it communicative to children of your language, but at the same time to keep the style of the author. But I wouldn't say it is untranslatable at all, but I would say that translator does not just translate. It is a kind of interpretation, as you say. They are not called translators. They should be called interpreters in this case, because you have to, again, combine together the style of the poet, the meaning of the poem, and the understanding the culture of the reader who is going to read it. In the opposition of author and reader, of poet and reader, you have only 2 points that create together the general understanding of the poem. It's not just about only a poet that writes, it's also about what readers read in this poem, what they hear in this poem. And it can be absolutely different from what you share. But if we are talking about translation, there are 3 points of communication. There is a medium. And some translators, some interpreters are absolutely brilliant in doing that. But it doesn't mean that any person can translate. Not even brilliant translators who do not like poetry, who do not feel that magic of its melody and atmosphere. For them, it will be much harder to do this work than just for prose or for articles or for some business literature, something like that. But there are some of them that do it brilliantly, and that's great, because it means that all the world can enjoy those ideas, can enjoy those that art of words. But that will not be the translation in 100% as we can imagine it. I think so.
We used to have a project back in our department of French, Italian, and Spanish students, and we had the literature or poetry days, something like this, and we actually had several years in a row. So one year we with the students initiated I wouldn't say it was a contest, but more a flash mob, a festival of translating from French, Italian, Spanish into Ukrainian. And the other year, we did the other way around. So we got the Ukrainian poets from Lina Kostenko, from Lesya Ukrainka, from, the contemporary poets like Isdrik and so on. And we translated them into French, Spanish, and Italian. Well, students did, and we helped. And that was an amazing thing to do, because when you have a couple of hours of students reading both poems in Ukrainian and in the foreign language for them, and how much energy they put it, and how then they described their emotions, what was difficult, where they had some kind of guidance. Their eyes were just shining, because you saw the effort, you saw that they are in love with this. They were the ones who chose the poetry to translate, and those who succeeded, they were just enlightened by that. That was a simple beauty of that contest, and I totally agree with you that it is very difficult to translate. But when you do with all your love, when you're loving not only people but also the poetry, that helps a lot, of course.
Yeah, and I would also like to add that it's not the harder task if we compare it to other types of translation. It's just another kind of task that brings another kind of enjoyment, another kind of that amazing feeling which you have when you had a hard task and you did it, when you had a sort of hard task in math when you were a child and you understood how it works and you feel like, wow, I am so clever, I did it, I could do it, that I am the winner, and so on. And your brain is full of that happiness. I am absolutely sure that, for example, people who translate scientific articles that are very hard and that have to be very exact, and you have to understand all the processes that are described. When they understand how to do it correctly, they also have the same feeling. But these are just different kinds of work, all of them enjoyable in their own way, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, in different ways. Now that you mentioned that event, Julia, that you had with your students, it came to my mind that I also have kind of experience of translating Lina Kostenko in Italian for one of the events that we had in Reggio Calabria. People from different cultures, different languages were invited to read a poetry from their culture with an Italian translation so that the audience would understand. And as I didn't find anything, I decided to just take the one that was most applicable to the place, and I chose both Torre Cecilio and tried to give it an Italian sound or voice. I had this special feeling, Marina, that you're saying about absolutely childish excitement of having found the right word, having found the right sound, as for me. It was a very modest effort. Anyway, what I could see by the reaction of the audience was that it was absolutely accepted and welcome and so on.
That's why we are talking about interpreting. It's not possible just to reflect the same meaning in the same form, in the same melody, and so on. Yeah, sure.
That's beautiful. So we actually formulated quite a lot of things about you to reveal who is our guest. So we already discussed that Marina is writing poems, is writing everything, right? So it's very much connected with writing and interpreting and creating texts and reading and so on. Marina, would you maybe formulate it a little bit better than we do in this case? How do you manifest yourself to the outer world? What is something that you feel that manifests you adequately?
It is always the hard question for me, because I would say in general that I am a beauty and knowledge sharer and perhaps inspirer if I have to manifest myself without giving details on what I do in my different jobs. Why it is hard? Because being useful and being helpful is not a job in the modern world. And I cannot say that I want to take only one side of being useful and helpful. That's why I am doing different jobs.
So we're happy to have you here, and thank you for your fantastic sharing and spreading the beauty and the love and the happiness out to the world. So all we can say is live and learn.
Live and learn.
Live and learn.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you share Live and Learn philosophy, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all the major social media, comment, and spread the word about this podcast so that more people could get their weekly portion of growth mindset content. Live and learn.